Hello, everyone, and welcome to Unfiltered. I'm Stevi Carr, founder and CEO of Wise Wellness Guild, and I'm so happy to see all of you here today investing in yourself and investing in your wellness. I'm so thrilled to have you here to be able to speak in an unfiltered manner about really important topics that impact the women in our community. And in partnership with Fifth Third Private Bank, we're here to speak about women and the mass exodus of them from the workforce and how we can connect with our male allies to help prevent that from happening. 1 in 4 women are considering leaving the workforce, according to the most recent McKinsey study of women in the workforce. And we are at risk of losing 6 years of progress in just one single year due to the impact of COVID-19. So thank you again for being a part of the solution and being able to have real dialogue and conversation with incredible people here today. And I am so thrilled and honored to introduce our moderator for the evening, Kelly Solar. Kelly Solar is Senior Vice President and Managing Director at Fifth Third Private Bank. Kelly has over 30 years of experience in the financial services industry, and she joined Fifth Third Bank 20 years ago as a private banker and has held various leadership roles. The part that I'm the most excited about to have Kelly here moderating this evening is because she herself has really stepped into an incredible senior leadership role as a woman in the workforce and been a true champion for so many others around her. She shows up in the same way at work as she does in life, and it's incredibly inspiring to be able to see someone really step into their whole self that way. So Kelly, thank you so much for being here with us this evening. I really appreciate you guiding this discussion, and I look forward to hearing what everyone has to say. Oh, the classic, you're on mute, Kelly. It would not be a virtual event without you're on mute. There we go.
Hi, everyone. Sorry. Stevie and I have a private joke about that now. I am classically on mute all the time. Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining us this evening, and thank you for spending an hour of your time with us tonight. So my goal for tonight is really to have an open, frank dialogue about this topic, so we can truly say tonight was unfiltered. My hope is for each of you to walk away with one meaningful action to advance or create male allyship in your life, at home or at work. So now I would like to offer each panelist an opportunity to introduce themselves, give a brief comment about their professional role and their respective organization. Stacey, you want to kick us off?
Yes. Well, good evening, everyone. I am Stacey Browning. I'm Managing Director at Cincy Tech. And prior to getting involved in the venture world here in Cincinnati, Ohio, I was president of Paycor, which was founded here, where I'm very proud to say that I was definitely an advocate for women, especially women in tech. But I will also say that I am a continual learner when it comes to finding ways to be as inclusive as possible and build diverse workplaces. So thank you for having me this evening.
Thanks, Stacey. Richard, I'll throw it to you.
Hi, everybody. Good evening. My name is Richard Cook. Thank you, Stevie, for inviting me this evening. I'm honored to be part of this illustrious group. I feel very honored and privileged. I work at Procter & Gamble. I'm Director of Communications at P&G, and I'm also a new business owner. I own a gay bar and dance club, E19 Lounge Bar and Discotheque, that we opened in October during COVID, which was very challenging. I'm originally from the UK, so you can probably detect that I have a funny accent. I live in Cincinnati. This is home. I love this city. I love the people. I love the food. I love the bars. And I'm a huge advocate for equality within the LGBTQ plus community. And pretty much anything I say this evening that pertains to the LGBTQ plus community, the spectrum of the community, including women, can be applied to any diversity group, essentially. So I hope to be able to offer some insights and tools that you can take away with you this evening.
Thanks, Richard. Barbara?
Hi, I'm Barbara Turner. I am President and CEO of Ohio National Financial Services. I've been in that role for a whopping 27 days. Prior to becoming President and CEO, I was President and COO. Been with the company for almost 24 years, in the financial services industry for 40 years. And diversity, equity, and inclusion is a big reason why I'm in the industry. I believe that financial literacy, financial independence, financial security, in some ways help level the playing field for individuals who have been marginalized. And so I believe strongly, I have motion detectors, sorry, need to move around a bit more.
Got a light crew.
Need to dance or something, but I am passionate about giving back and really about equity and inclusion, and it's been a big part of my life work. And so I'm happy to be here. Thank you, Stevie and Bree and Kelly. I'm just happy to be here.
Thanks, Barbara. Well, I'm going to kick the conversation off tonight by asking Barbara the basic question of, what is allyship? And can you share a personal example where you've benefited from allyship, either in your career or at home?
Okay, so I would say it's about building relationships based on trust. It requires some vulnerability because you're really seeking or becoming an intentional advocate, and will have to be willing to learn about others and support individuals who are often marginalized and underserved and really do not always have a seat at the table. For me personally, it starts at home. And so, marrying a great partner who is truly an ally and a supporter of what I do as a professional woman, raising sons that are respectful of women and people in general and willing to lend a voice to causes that really support and advocate on behalf of women. In terms of, from a career perspective, in the financial services industry, it's very male dominated. It's better now, but 40 years ago when I started, especially in the trust department, there really were not very many women, and I had to be vulnerable and ask individuals for support, ask them for support of my ideas, ask them for invitations to events that I otherwise would not have been invited to, ask them for their time in helping to teach me and train me in different areas where some were not willing to take the time out to mentor me. And so I've benefited a lot from allies throughout my career, and I've also made a point of giving back and being an ally to others.
Thanks, Barbara. It does, thank you. Stacey, any additional thoughts on your personal opinion of allyship and your experience with allyship in your career and or at home?
I think, once you get to be in senior leadership as a woman and perhaps in other, with other demographics, many times, we've come up being the only one of our type, if you will. I know for me, I've been the only woman in the room. And so I just was thinking when Barbara was talking about needing to ask to be included, I share that same experience. I was fortunate working for Paycor. It was founded by a man who always included me. I was included as the only woman in the boardroom well before I became the company's president and had broad responsibility for the company. And I remember someone else sort of figuring out who I was and what I was contributing. He was a board observer. And he said to me, you're kind of funny. You're kind of a slow burn. And I'm like, well, what do you mean? And he said, well, you're unassuming. We think you're going to come in here and you're here for the coffee and administrative things. The next thing you know, you're powerfully changing the business or generating, revenue. And I thought to myself, I think he thinks he's being helpful. I think this is supposed to be constructive, but I was thankful that he told me what, as a man, what might have been in some other men's heads, maybe not everybody's, but I had the talk track, and I took responsibility to then build relationships and maybe teach some of the board members in that boardroom, men, how to be an ally. And I met with each one-on-one. I asked for their opinion. I showed respect by putting some of their suggestions into action when it made sense. And I think I turned around that perception, but I had to speak up, and I also had to bring them along to help them understand that I was a serious contributor as a woman.
Right, Stacey.
Yeah,
Go ahead,
Stacey, Stacey, I think it's really interesting that you said you had to bring them along, because I think that's so spot on. I'm generalizing when I speak here about both men, women. It's not going to be true for everybody every way, but I think a lot of times, and I'm speaking from the perspective of the male or the man, they don't intentionally be exclusive. They don't decide that, but there's this unconscious bias that hijacks or relies on to old stereotypes, and by old I mean really old stereotypes, and if they're not brought along or called out by peers, that perpetuates itself. And I think that so many people, men, women, etc., are willing to help. They're just not even conscious of their own behavior sometimes. And so calling it out is a big piece of it, whether you're male or female.
Tim, you make a very good point. I can't tell you how many times I've attended an event. Well, first of all, when they see you're a female, a person of color, and you're in this room with a bunch of powerful men, you tend to feel like you're being interviewed. What are you doing here, and who are you with, and how did you come to be here? And quite often people would automatically ask the question, oh, are you in operations? Or, oh, are you in this role or that role? And I got to a point where I would say, well, why do you ask? Help me understand how you came to that conclusion. And then we would have a dialogue about it. But I went from saying, no, I do X, Y, Z to, wait a minute, time out. Why do you ask? Why did you make that assumption?
Barbara, I remember the first time we met was when you had walked into a meeting at the Queen City Club, and kind of that powerful room of men. It wasn't all men, obviously you're being there. And I picked up on that very thing, that you looked as if you were walking in going, well, here we go again. I'm going to have to live this. And that to me, that resonates. That's emotional to me. And that's the role, I think, of the male ally in inviting that person into the room conversation, making them feel welcome, because I've been in that spot before too, where I'm a white male, if you can't tell, but there are times when I have been the only, and that's not a good feeling. This is a really emotional, this is really emotionally motivated, and that's where I start from, and then it becomes a professional or capitalistic motivation as well.
Well, I can tell you, I remember that first meeting at Queen City Club when we met, and you were my ally during that meeting. I remember you saw everyone kind of like asking me all of these questions, and you came over and started joking and talking about my role. And at one point, I remember I said, I feel like I'm melting, and you just started laughing. But
I think you said it a little different than that.
I probably did. I did. But I appreciated the fact that you stepped up and stepped in, and you saw what was going on, and you were willing to say, hey, she's here for a reason. Let me introduce you to Barbara. And yes.
Thanks, Barbara and Tim. So to that point, Tim and Richard, you've been invited tonight because you are considered strong allies to women. What are some specific things men can do to be better allies? And I'll turn to Tim and ask a question. Hey, Tim, does the Me Too movement have any impact on your practices of male allyship? And how do you process that?
Yeah, sadly it does. And I wish, here we sit in 2021, and I wish I wasn't having to say this or admit this or work through it. But it does. And how it impacts me is that I really got to be careful about the environment that I'm in with regard to that allyship. Unfortunately, and I'm not just talking about myself with another woman, I'm talking about the space. And while that may be conjured up in my mind, having a cocktail in a bar in the evening now is something that I'm sensitive to. A lunch is way more safe than that afternoon cocktail. Doing it in the office is way more safe than doing it in public. And it hasn't caused me to stop, but I think it's important that you're all aware of that. And it's particularly exacerbated when there is a big age gap. And you can read between the lines there. And that perception persists not only from men, but from women. In fact, some of the times where I feel like I get the odd look, it is sometimes more from women. So I hate that I say that. It hasn't caused me to stop, but it has caused me to modify my behavior. It's really considered, I really am reticent to actually give a compliment sometimes, to say, gee, Kelly, I really like that blouse you're wearing, because that can be hijacked into being something creepy. So it has caused me to double clutch sometimes, and unfortunately that's where it is.
Well, I would love to jump in just for a second, and Tim, I really appreciate you stepping into this conversation, because it is the reason why we have unfiltered conversations. We know that men are taking a step back, not because they don't want to be really great mentors, but it's because there is a culture within the workplace that was built on the construct of male, the way that men create relationships, right, between each other, because they were the ones that were in positions of leadership. So going to get cocktails right after work, right? Or going to go hit the links, and like, I golf, I have cocktails, but like those positions of creating that one-on-one connection, if you're not built on a level of trust and respect first, you can definitely step into a place where it can be uncomfortable. And I just think that that's the piece that I really want to portray, is that any relationship, even woman to woman, I have personally said, I love your shoes, and people look at me and they're like, I'm more than shoes. Like, don't come at me like that. And I'm like,
sorry. Yeah.
And I think it's because I don't know them, and I don't know enough about them to know whether that is how they want to be complimented or not. So I think it's just I just wanted to jump in and say thank you so much for taking that question and for answering it truthfully. And I hope that kind of shows and demonstrates the type of conversation that we want to have tonight. And I would love to hear from anybody else on this topic in particular.
I'd like to jump in with how to, because I respect that opinion too, and it's nice to have it out. One thing I think that we wait for are women. I saw a question about this come in through the chat, like a women's group and top-down programs and a big supply closet when it comes to let's have a more diverse workplace or more women in leadership or whatever it may be. And that feeling or uncertainty about how to act sort of paralyzes people without making so they can't make a difference with the one or the two or the three people who could really actually, you know, do great things at the company. And one suggestion I always have, especially for men, is to be recklessly invitational. Because you know, so much is being talked about the network effect and being in the right rooms. You'd be surprised. Women are so grateful to be included. We will hold confidences. We will not speak over you. We will give you cue cards. If you fill our brain with how to do what's required at the or what's the problem, we will fix it. We will solve problems. And so many times we're like out of the room, we're not at the right level or whatnot. And so there's a follow-on to this suggestion. You know, I did this tactic with 3 African-American women who worked in my organization at Paycor. And I think they kind of knew what was up. Honestly, each one of them would have been successful in her own right. I just gave it a little nudge by including her, bringing her to meetings with me, whatever the case, giving her a new learning opportunity. And, but then what happened is I'm spending time with another person and I'm getting to know her. And then what my responsibility is, and when you recklessly include someone, if you're a man who happens to be a woman or a younger woman, guess what? You're in rooms without that woman. And what greater way to show others the way is to then promote and cheerlead the woman, not about her shoes, but instead about, hey, you know what? I brought so-and-so from operations to the pricing strategy meeting. I was amazed at her financial acumen and her quickness of ideation about solutions. And all of a sudden, you've now given her personal PR so that others may consider her for their rooms. Anyway, that's how I feel like it's one person, one meeting at a time. My recommendation is to be recklessly invitational.
Stacey, I love that. I mean, it's kind of channeling, you know, Hamilton, you know, in the room where it happens.
Yeah.
And I couldn't agree more with you. And it can be so validating and I'm saying this totally selfishly now, and so powerful to me as I think back on my career, and particularly the last 10 years. You know, I know that I got a lot of great results because of the women who surrounded me, who would run through. Kelly's being one of them, Bree's on here, Kim Hallbauer, Beth Hartman. I mean, they were people that I think would run through brick walls, one, because they're appreciative of that, and two, because they were good to start with, right? And it was just about saying you belong, like, you know, you're here, and to be in the room where it happens. And I think that's going to be a hard lesson for men to learn when the room where it happens, and I don't mean this stereotypically, becomes getting a manicure or, you know, not the golf course. And I know women golf, but, you know, that's going to be that is going to shake up the world as we continue this trend. And if you look at what that does for companies, you know, the performance share, when women are relevantly represented in senior management, performance goes up by 50%, right? And so it's going to be a different world. And for those guys who don't get that or don't understand that, woe to them, because they will be vanquished.
Hey, thanks, Tim. And I want to build on that by asking Richard to comment on something he mentioned to me earlier. He's got some thoughts on activation of ally activities. So what other things could be done? Stacey and Tim mentioned a couple of things that are meaningful. I'd love to hear from Richard.
Yeah, a couple of things I'd like to say. You know, first of all, I'm clearly male and clearly white, and with that comes just some inherent privilege, and so I'm very conscious and aware of that. I'm also gay, and so I'm also conscious of when I don't have privilege, and so in being an effective ally to women, I'm aware of when I have privilege and when I don't have privilege. And so I feel it incumbent upon me to use that privilege and power to activate allies in the workplace and in the community. And what do I mean by activating allies? I know the grammar police will get me for saying this, but I see ally as a verb, not a noun. It's taking action. It's not a title that's bestowed upon you. And anyone can be an ally. Anyone can be an ally wherever they sit in the company. We're told that you can lead from your seat, wherever that seat is in the company. The same is true of being an ally. Anyone can be an ally, and it involves taking action. And so it was about 10 years ago that I rolled out the ally strategy, the action plan for actually allies in the LGBTQ+ community at P&G. I used to lead the employee resource group there for North America, covering 50 sites. And so about 10 years ago, we rolled out the strategy to activate allies in the workplace. And so this has proven to be so successful that other employee resource groups within P&G are now looking at this and reapplying this to their situation. So what do I mean by the strategy? It's pretty simple. I think if you're asking allies to take action and do something, you have to educate them. You have to equip them with information and resources. And so we put together an ally toolkit at P&G that contains a whole vast amount of information that allies can actually access and equip themselves with knowledge and information. The other thing that we do is to make sure that allies are visible. Okay, and we actually mark our allies with stickers. So our security badges at P&G, we actually put a sticker on ally badges, on security badges to show that people are actually allies. And we actually include an ally signature on emails. So these are a couple of examples of actually ensuring visibility of allies so that they stand out and they can be approached by women, by people of color, by LGBTQ+ people, and know that they can have a safe conversation and get the support.
Richard, how did someone get to be an ally at, like, they get anointed, right? They get a sticker. They might have been an ally long before they got a sticker. How does that take place?
Well, I think it's begins with self. It's about wanting to take action. It's wanting to do something. And we actually found that we had people approaching us at P&G asking, I want to be an ally. I want to do something, but I don't know what to do. And so the first step was, great, you've taken the first step. You've anointed yourself, right? You said you want to be an ally. The next step then is actually giving the ally information and tools and resources to be effective in the workplace, in their team, at their site. Okay, it could be as simple as showing up at an event, a diversity event, or marching in the Pride Parade. Okay, that's taking action. We also provide allies with tools and resources to speak up when they hear inappropriate language. And so we have in our toolkit some help for when you hear inappropriate language or behavior, is to confront that appropriately. The other piece is ensuring that allies are seen by senior leadership for the work that they do. And it's important to visibly recognize allies and to recognize the behavior. And then finally, we provide a forum for allies. So this is a place where allies can meet and share stories and share best practices and energize each other. And so this has really worked very well for us in supporting our allies, and really we've experienced a significant step change in the organization.
Thanks, Richard. I appreciate that. So we know that senior female leaders are burning out at a rapid rate. And this is attributed to feeling like you're because you're the only one in the room who's a female, feeling like you're always on. And we know that females are more likely to be in a dual career relationship. They're mothers. And since COVID-19, 54% have said they are exhausted and 39% say they are burnt out. Stacey, I'd like to ask you, can you speak to female leadership burnout and your observations and any tips and thoughts you have on how senior leaders can best thrive in their positions?
Well, I'm picking up, it's any kind of cohort. I mean, there's so much. I'm picking up some things that Richard said, which I think, like, now I serve, I was in the boardroom at Paycorp. Now I serve as board members for companies. And when the topic of specifically the topic you just brought up, stress on families, especially during this pandemic period, whether it's child care, different, it's just having to be the school proctor, in addition to getting the senior roles work done. The boards that seem enlightened are the ones that are willing to do two things. One, talk about it at the board level, that this is a human capital, and capital sounds so insensitive, but this is a business issue. But two, and not all of them do this without my prompting, my speaking up, but the enlightened ones give people an opportunity to share and just listen. And it's that outside in perspective, not alone, someone's listening. I don't think any one of us expects a manager or a CEO or CFO to solve it all for us. I mean, we're facing situations that are hard to solve on an individual level, but everyone can be a listening ear, and everyone can create forums for camaraderie. I know this year, on the topic of diversity, some of those conversations or listening sessions were extremely painful. But the unfiltered, that's why we're here. I mean, it takes bravery to even have the conversation. And then it's almost like individuals' tanks are filled to then go be that ally, go be, figure out the solution. You just become, the battery gets energized again. So listening sessions, I think, are really key. And the only other suggestion I have from my own experience as a woman and having a dual career partner, or home life, is to, we don't do it all. Outsource as much as possible. And aside, just a quick funny, just yesterday, my husband said to me, he heard that Mark Cuban said, I'm stressed, what pressures me is how little time I have to make an impact. But it dawned on Mark Cuban that he could pay other people to do things so he didn't have to do them, so that he had more time, in a sense. And I looked at my husband and I said, well, you've just described how we have made it through the last 10 years together, because whether it's dry cleaning or home cleaning or whatnot, like, we don't do it all. And it is okay to say you cannot do it all, especially if you're also gifted in the workplace.
Yeah, I would also say we really need to give women permission to say, I need a break. I need to take care of this. We need to cultivate an environment where flexibility is okay, and people understand they're not going to be penalized for leveraging the flexibility that is there for them. It's also important for individuals to know, again, they don't have to do it all perfectly. I don't believe in work-life balance. I believe we make choices at any given point in time. And in this environment where women are not only contributing at work, but also homeschooling in many cases, and taking care of the household, and many cannot afford to hire help, if you will. It is very, very important that we say time out. It's okay to reprioritize some things, or to get that done later. It's okay to take a break during the day and follow up in the evening, because ultimately we want everyone to be in a good place, a healthy place mentally, and to be able to give their all. And they can't do it if they're burnt out. No one wins if someone leaves the workforce because they're burnt out or if they do a poor job because they're burnout. And so we need to have open conversations around the fact that we all need breaks, especially in this environment where it feels like 24/7. I know I'm working more since we're working from home than I did when I was in the office. And a lot of people feel, okay, well, that's expected now. It's okay to say, well, not today. I'm going to take a break. So. Yeah.
And Barbara, I want to build on that. I think that it's required in the workplace to have that mental safety to be able to make that choice for yourself too. And I know that sometimes in this pandemic, I know I'm my own boss, but I'm kind of a mean boss sometimes. And sometimes I have too high expectations of myself. And sometimes I push myself. And I think that it's about having that mental safety and the support of other people around you to be able to encourage you to take that break as well and tell you you're working too hard, or, hey, I see you demonstrating some really toxic behaviors, maybe you should cool it. And I think that it's also having a really great relationship that just comes back to trust and respect with your supervisor, because I do think that saying it is one thing, but actually really activating it and really stepping into that role, supporting that person's decision and actively creating a plan about how they're going to step back in is just honestly as important as saying it, you know, in the first place. And I think it's just really amazing that Stacey, you had also mentioned the bump in pay. I just want to make sure that everybody saw that a short-term bump in pay for daycare during the pandemic. I think it's small things like that that create mental safety in corporations that really support and walk the walk.
Yeah, I'm following the chat questions as well about whether our company's really talking about this with regard to daycare or the break or concierge services. And I can tell you the unequivocal answer is yes. A lot of that started even pre-pandemic. And I think that pandemic is catalyzing all of this. And I can tell you just today we were having a conversation. I am completely confident in our organization, at least, that all of those things will come to fruition. We've had concierge for a long time. It's a wonderful service. It just, but we're talking about this flexibility of work schedule, flexibility in the schedule over the course of a year, being able to drop out for a couple of months. Those are very much on the plate, and I frankly think that it's going to be just table stakes as this unfolds. It's going to be a war on talent, and all of us on this call, all of you on the call, are going to make decisions based upon quality of life and ability of life. In the companies who don't embrace that will be left behind. And so I very much think this pandemic has catalyzed those conversations by years.
I'd be interested to know how many people, I mean, it's slowed down. It sounds like a lot of people here in financial services, and so PPP loans were, just caused so much additional work this year in particular. And, we really stopped talking about always on. It is, and being at home, it's just, we are always on. We don't even comment it on anymore. But what I see now are happening, and it might be a good takeaway to do more, is sort of reset, like meeting times that keep getting later, maybe say no to those, don't schedule that. We just had a conversation on the Cincy Tech team about really thinking like 3 times before sending an email over the weekend. Now, I'm used to weekend emails. You get caught up and there's energy to that, but in a way, it's just more. And if we're always, if all week long we're at this frenetic pace, maybe we should build in a break, of ourselves and not communicate as much over the weekend. It was just like a little nod to say, like, relax. And it sounds like, gosh, we're supposed to take off weekends. You have to understand this is just the norm now, and we're trying to backstop the new norm of always on from at home.
And even if you tell people you don't expect them to respond, they feel like they have to respond if you send it on the weekend. I will begin the line with, I hope you do not see this until Monday, and if you do, please do not respond. I get a response back right away. And so I'm trying to condition myself to stop sending emails on the weekend. And the other thing I've been really considering, and I know there are Ohio National people on this call, but having a, no meeting Wednesday, or no meetings afternoon on Fridays, or something. We need time to think. We need time to also do. And in this environment where Zoom is so easy and webinars are so easy, we find ourselves in more and more meetings, in my opinion. And so I've been really contemplating, should we have that day or that half a day where there are no meetings? We shut down the calendars and we get things caught up, or just have time to process and do some strategic thinking, as opposed to back-to-back meetings, if you will.
I don't know how many people on this call are self-employed or small business owners. I know it's incredibly tough, because if you're if the buck stops with you, you may not have the opportunity to take that day off, or you may not have availability of concierge services. I'm lucky I work in a large corporation, but I'm also a small business owner. So I see the benefits on one side, but also the challenges on the other side. And so as I launched this business during COVID, it was really important for me to be honest with my supporters and ask them for help. And don't be afraid to ask for help. I've had to do that financially for my business. And so I just want to acknowledge, that there may be people on this call who are challenged and may not have resources, may not have assistance. And so I would be happy to talk to folks about some of the approaches I've taken, if that would be helpful.
Richard, thank you so much for saying that. We do have a lot of people who, in our community, who are small business owners, some people who, like you, work full time and have small business and volunteer and do all the things, right? And I think that when it is a part of your livelihood, no matter where it is, I do want to specifically speak to may not have the corporate resources piece, or somebody who's in a service position or role. I think that I will always go back to your willingness to be vulnerable and ask for help when you need it is the single, and not assuming that somebody, because they haven't asked, doesn't mean that they don't want to help you or support you. And I think that we assume a lot of times that we're the strongest person in the room, and so, that like they've got it, or I'm okay. And I do think that that's a part of it, is when you create that culture around you, people will hold you accountable for taking that time and using those resources.
Thanks, Stevie. So I want to share something I recently learned. Senior female leaders disproportionately take on allyship work versus their senior male counterparts. So if you think about that, women are the strongest allies of Black women, LGBTQ, by an average of about 13 to 21% more across a variety of metrics that they looked at. So I'm asking the question of, how can senior male leaders best support Black and LGBTQ employees, thus sharing the load of female senior leaders? I don't know, Richard, do you want to comment on that?
Yeah, this is really fascinating, because a senior diversity and inclusion leader told me once that we were talking about allyship within Gable, our LGBTQ plus employee resource group. And we were talking about the work that needed to be done. And so she looked at me and she said, you guys shouldn't be doing all of this work. You shouldn't be shouldering this work, right? this is work that the majority can shoulder. So the majority can shoulder and spread the work out. And so because we're such a small number, we find ourselves taking on extra work and disproportionately. And so I agree that the work needs to be shared. It needs to be shared by male allies. We need to activate male allies, and I think we've done a pretty good job of doing that within the company. But the work does need to be shared more broadly.
Thank you. Barbara, I'd love to hear your opinion as well.
I am very intentional about asking men to shoulder the load there. Just really being very intentional about asking them to be proactive in supporting women and advocating and supporting the ideas of women, in promoting women and recognizing their talent. I have what I would consider courageous conversations about the need for us all to do our part as leaders and to recognize talent for talent. And we all have unconscious biases, and so I think sometimes individuals need help in getting over their biases and help in making an intentional decision to not automatically mentor, sponsor, or advocate for individuals who look like them, think like them, or grew up in the same manner in which they grew up. And so sometimes they need that nudge, and I think you just have to get it out there and say, I would like to see you mentor X, or support more women, or advocate for people of color, or be the executive sponsor of a diversity associate resource group, or what have you. I mean, there are tons of opportunities. And I think also if women are intentional also about being mentors and sponsors for men, it's much easier for you to ask men to give back in the same manner.
Right.
That's part. I know women need sponsors and allies, but you need someone mentoring the men so that they know how to treat the women. And we can't
model the way.
Yes, indeed.
Yeah.
Barbara, you mentioned given that nudge. A couple years ago, I read statistical data that I won't be able to pull back, but it essentially said that in a career role, in a career move, men are way more likely to think, oh, I'm ready, even when they're not. And women are more likely to think, oh, I'm not ready, I just need another new year or two. And that's so wrong. I've seen it firsthand. And I do see it more in women saying, man, you could do this now. You like take the leap, and that breathing that life, breathing that confidence into it means, I think, a world of difference, men or women, but women tend to be to believe less in themselves because they've had so many negative messages, I think. And so just that purposeful nudge that you said makes a huge difference.
Yeah, I was talking to someone yesterday. We had a one-on-one meeting, and we talked about the fact that during one of our women's network meetings, one of our speakers said, if there's a role, President of the United States, the man will say, I breathed air today, I'm qualified. Look at how amazing I am.
Right.
And the female will say, oh, I need about 10 more years. I need to do this, and that. And I mean, you name the role, typically men are more confident because that's how, that's the environment we
socialize. Yeah.
Yes.
I was going to say that similarly, how especially the leaders in this session could maybe help this dynamic and one of the greatest things I think about 2020 has been that we're sort of in the clear to have these unfiltered conversations and to raise the flag and commit to doing things differently. And it doesn't have to be forever, but I know I had the opportunity to hire someone here, and I just called it out, like, we're not going to interview until we have a person of color on the panel for this role. Or I remember too in my past asking a man if he considered gender when he was in the hiring process, and he was just truthful and said no. And so as his leader, I said, okay, from here on out, we're going to include diversity to some extent on every interview panel. And I've also encouraged men to say no to speaking engagements on panels when there isn't a woman who's a fellow panelist, not just the moderator. Like, we can organizationally draw lines in the sand of things that are not okay. And there's all this pipelining of talent if you try to put quotas on it. But I do think there's different guideposts, and it could be for now, of how we operationalize this to make sure the great talent in the organization that happens to be of a different race or gender or sexual orientation can have at-bats at these great jobs. We can change that conversation.
Right. Thanks, Stacey. I want to comment on something I heard earlier that I think maybe you, Stacey, had mentioned, and I'm going to throw it to Richard and Tim. I said one of my goals tonight was that I wanted everybody to have something actionable to take with them. And I'm sitting here listening to the conversation, taking notes, and I see something for me in an area of opportunity is that I need to bring the men along. I need to do it. I need to be intentional, right? I am the only female on my leadership team in my region at Fifth Third. And I would like to hear what I could do that would be meaningful, that would be engaging and tactful. I don't want to alienate, but I want to have the conversation. What would that look like? And then if Stacey and Barbara could listen and add in, what have you tried to do that has worked and maybe not worked, right? I can be pretty direct and I can hit it head on, but I want to engage in the conversation, and I want people to be honest and truthful. How can I propel this forward for myself and for all the women that I work with on all kinds of levels, and pave the way for it to be a better place, when I'm someday on the beach in the middle of winter in February and not in Cincinnati. It's going to happen.
Yeah. So Kelly, I think the question was, what can you do to drive that?
Yes. What could I do? What could I have a conversation with you? Is it,
yeah. So
what's meaningful?
Well, I'm willing to support whatever you do, but I think as you and I have personally had conversations many times, oddly enough, truth is always the best policy. Found out a heavy dose of truth works. And I think I know the guys you're talking about well enough to just say, hey, we had this conversation last night and this point came out, and my gosh, I want to do something about it. And do you think like this? Are you aware of this? Do you intentionally stay away from allyship? Do you know how meaningful? I think that's the way you get into it. And I don't think that's accusational or threatening. And if it is, that's their issue, not yours. And so
I would
echo. I appreciate that.
I would echo Tim's comments, and maybe some builds on that. When we actually kicked off the Ally program, the P&G, we actually had those crucial conversations with allies. So I think finding people, finding men that are receptive.
Okay.
Not all men are going to be receptive, right? Some of the conversations are going to be more straightforward with some than others. And so I think sometimes you have to choose your allies. And so having that conversation with someone who you think is receptive and telling them what you need. That's what I did, as when I had conversations with Allies for Gable, we told our allies, here's what help looks like.
Thank you.
So if this is unfiltered, I think where I've struggled in giving feedback is that I don't want to perpetuate the very stereotype that I'm a woman. Like, I'm so emotional, I'm kind of whining over locker room talk or being excluded. And I think I figured out the right voice because I want to be the cool woman too, especially with an all male team, and let things roll off my back. But I once you have the mindset that you're going to speak up in a professional, matter of fact, helpful way, you kind of get better at it. It's like the first time's the hardest. Just a quick few examples. Language about every person in leadership always being a he. Like, well, we'll have to find a new guy, a new CPA, and I'm thinking, I quickly go outside the meeting and say, we need to be careful. A woman can do that job too. I don't know if you realized you used the male pronoun there. And I don't want to be policing that, but oh no, I didn't think that. You're right. But that's just that deferral to the male pronoun sends an impact to everyone else in the room. So I first give people the benefit of the doubt, but will say something. A second example, really quickly, that I called someone out on, and that sounds, I did it very matter of fact, unemotionally, is I believe it was well intentioned. Some men that worked directly for me were socially hanging out at one of, I think it was a Tough Mudder event, and so a lot of bro stuff going on. And so they wound up, of course, on the way there talking about business, and I felt like it was just, they carried forward that to meetings. Even though I was responsible for that area, it felt like they were running a play, but forgot that I need to be, on the. I'm terrible at sports analogies. Everybody's ever. I don't know. So anyway, I was there, and I had to speak up and say, appreciate you taking this forward. I need to be involved, or maybe go do my work for me, but a reminder, I'm the decision maker. And those matter of fact, direct language, because that tends to be how most men, not all men, like to be communicated to, seem to work versus the overreaction or taking someone to school. I do hope that's helpful.
Yeah.
It is. Thanks, Stacey.
Not making assumptions that they know, because, just like people point out things that you may say or do that you really were not aware of the impression that you left. I think sometimes it's really educating those individuals, having a conversation, not making assumptions, and doing it in the moment. Like, if you witness situations where maybe a woman offered a suggestion and everyone's quiet, and then a moment later the guy says the same thing, maybe changes one word, and everyone's like, oh yes, amen. You have to point out those moments. Well, thank you for supporting Beth with her suggestion. I appreciate the affirmation, and afterwards pull them aside and say, do you realize what just happened here?
Stacey, you said, I thought that really resonated, saying your reticence to be that woman. Yeah, I think that's a good point. A woman I worked with, Kim Hallbauer, and she's blessed me to tell this story, would say to me, "You're half chick." She would say that to me, and I would always tell her, "Well, you're half dude." And we both took that as compliments. And I think there is some importance to be able to see it from both lenses. And when you can see that, I think that gives you credibility to men and myself credibility to women when you can see the other perspective.
Thanks, Tim. I agree. Well, I think that wraps up the conversation part of tonight. I want to say a sincere thank you to all the panelists for your time and energy tonight. and leading into the conversation, sharing personal stories, sharing maybe risky comments and experiences. But I hope everybody benefited from that tonight. Thank you. Before I hand it back to Stevie, I want to say a huge shout out to Stevi Carr for her time, energy, and talent in pulling this together tonight. I know this was a dream of hers. I hope you're pleased, Stevie. It was wonderful. Thank you for your efforts. Thank you, thank you.
Oh,
And back to Stevie.
thank you so much. And I really do appreciate the great fortune of having incredible leadership like this in our communities and real change makers, people who have been brave and willing to step forward. I know we had some additional questions and comments that in my closing thoughts, I just want to address. Allyship versus mentorship versus stepping in and network. And what I would say is I loved Richard's response that allyship is a verb. It's something that you not only learn and teach yourself, but it's something that you activate and something that you step into. And I think that that's what we heard today is what everything we heard was about making one step forward. And it doesn't have to be sweeping. It doesn't have to be day and night. It's about being curious about those around you and helping yourself to understand more about how you can better trust and respect people who are in your core circle, and then continue to go and be curious about people that don't look like you and people that don't have the same sexuality as you. And I think that that's really what we're saying at the foundation of this is it's just about activating it. So really, thank you so much again for all of the panelists this evening. We will have this recorded and posted to wisewellnessguild.com. We will also follow up with this recording on Facebook and in an email to all of you that participated this evening. So thank you again. Have a great evening. We've got amazing events coming up the whole month of February for Go Red and celebrating Black History Month. So I hope you'll join us. Have a good evening.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank
Good
you,
night.
everyone.
Bye.
Bye.